Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss a few aspects of the insane level of reporting, but more importantly regurgitation of the Tory client media's campaign against declared gifts for senior Labour politicians, most especially Keir Starmer. I'll be taking in how some of what's been reported isn't even true. The bits that are true look very different when put into context, how people are clutching their pearls over this, but don't seem to care that Robert Jenrick has just taken £75,000 donation from a foreign company doesn't even exist. But also how Labour should have known how both the press and others would react, and they should have worked out their PR game a lot better. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So let's begin with some of the more misleading elements of the gifts fever, which seems to be a permanent fixture on the Tory media front pages right now. So first, the claim that Starmer took more gifts in terms of value than any other MP last Parliament. Not true, not even remotely true. Boris Johnson alone took way more. In fact, it's been pointed out that Boris Johnson took more in gifts from a single friend, Lord Brownlow, than Starmer did from all sources. Well, why isn't this being mentioned? Why are they saying that Starmer took more gifts? That is because Johnson's gifts and donations do not appear on, and he took millions, by the way, to Starmer's 107,000. They do not appear on the Westminster accounts file for registered gifts because ministers don't register them. Or they don't register them there anyway. You know, so all of a sudden you've got rid of the most senior MPs in the last Parliament. You've taken them away in this league table. And what you've got left is anyone who's not a minister. Keir Starmer was the most senior non-minister over the last Parliament. He was also in the position of Leader of the Opposition for almost the full Parliament. So of course his register would come to more than most. What may be surprising to some people is how it's not that much more than some people who seem to have no seniority. What's that about? And it's a very different story when you look at just last year, however. So rather than the whole Parliament, because a lot of other MPs, their sort of stars waxed and waned. So if you look at over the last year and consider that if you're trying to conflate gifts with bribes, because that's what people are saying, oh, the gifts, they could be bribes. Okay. Surely in the last year, Starmer would have been receiving the lion's share of these gifts, given that it was never more certain in the last year that he was about to become Prime Minister. But no, £107,000 worth of gifts over the last Parliament, 24,000 the last year, which is about average. If you say, well, that's a little bit more than average. Actually, when you take inflation into account, it's really not. Probably got fewer in terms of value of gifts in election year than he did the average year before then. Robert Jenrick has recently accepted £75,000 from one benefactor alone in 3 lumps. And there were others as well, giving him tens of thousands more. No details as to what, you know, where the money's come from or what it was for. It's only the value. So it will have been cash. You Badenoch, the same stripping away, you know, you strip away, in her case, donations from the leadership campaign, which she's done. The thing with Jenrick, I think that £75,000 is for the leadership campaign, but he doesn't say so on the register. But Badenoch has distinguished between leadership campaign stuff and the other stuff. So the non-leadership campaign stuff, again, it's tens of thousands of pounds. It's more than Starmer took. Where's the news about this? Then there's the details of the gifts themselves. So why don't people like it? Like I said, it's because, well, there's this fear that it could be a bribe. It's a quid pro quo. I'm going to give you this. Like you go on this nice holiday. You have this nice suit, and in return, you know, I want some public money coming my way. And that's a reasonable fear. But you have to distinguish between something that is a bribe, something that might be a bribe, and something that is easily explained as just a genuine gift. For example, Labour backbencher Zara Sultana said in Parliament, I think it was last week, she said, you know, when people give you something, they expect something in return, right? Now, I am just going to point out, Sultana herself registered gifts and donations to almost the same value as Starmer. It's about 21,000 in her case. She's just a backbencher. Wow. Were her donors corruptly trying to win her favour? Or you would say, well, no, they just wanted her to win. Yeah, I accept that. So why doesn't she? Once we accept the fact that actually people can give you money or donations in other kind because they want to help you win the election, that's not corruption, is it? But let's look at an example of actual corruption. Bring back Robert Jenrick. Some years ago, as a minister, junior minister, He was given a free meal by a property developer. In return, Jenrick used his ministerial powers to rush through applications before a new change in the law that would have meant the developer ended up with a £45 million tax bill. In return, once it had been done, Jenrick had to do this first. He only got the free meal as an advance. The developer then donated to the Conservative Party to the tune of £12,000. So Jenrick was allowing the Treasury to be fiddled out of £45 million. That's our money. In return, his party got £12,000. Isn't it cheap to corrupt politics in this country? Now, that is obvious corruption. Nothing like this has happened with Starmer or the Labour government more widely. And if it ever does, there'll be every reason to cry foul. But it hasn't. Then there was the case of a private healthcare provider donating £20,000 to Jeremy Hunt, who had been Health Secretary just before, and as Health Secretary awarded NHS contracts to this private healthcare provider. Now, this isn't obvious corruption because it's possible the contract would have been awarded regardless. After all, there's good reason for a private healthcare provider to want to see the Conservatives win election. There doesn't need to be a dodgy deal. They could just conclude, well, it's good for our business that the Conservatives remain in power. But it is suspicious. It would be very hard to prove that donations were not linked to the contracts. Then there's Keir Starmer getting a couple of seats in the Arsenal box. There's no way Starmer can possibly do anything in return. FIFA are already wagging their finger in warning about Labour's plans for a football regulator, because if it looks like it amounts to political interference in football, we'd be kicked out of international competitions. In fact, the headline is we'd be kicked out of our own Euros in a few years' time. The idea that Starmer would piss people off in this country like that in return for a box seat is ridiculous. It's much more likely Arsenal just like the idea that the Prime Minister is a fan of their football club. And another thing I find absolutely insane is not so much the Tory press going on about this. That's baked in, it happens. Like when Corbyn's supporters complained about the media when he was Labour leader, I kept saying, this is what they're like with all Labour leaders. You just didn't notice. Well, some of these same people they're absolutely lapping this press coverage up right now. It's like, were you the ones whining about it a few years ago? Can you not see why they do it? It's because it works. You're falling for it every time. Let's look at the situation. A wealthy Labour politician bought Starmer and his wife some clothes in order for them to look their best on the campaign trail. I keep saying it's a bit like me. If I were out on the campaign trail actually for elected office, they'd take one look at me, look at my T-shirts and my hoodies, they go, you're not wearing that. You're not wearing that. Get yourself in an Armani suit. I don't have one. We will buy you one. Right? And Tory politicians have been gifted similar as well, by the way. Robert Jenrick, as I say, vying to be Conservative leader, he's been given £75,000 by a company registered offshore, which, thanks to the digging by Tortoise Media, we know isn't a real company at all. Doesn't have assets, doesn't have staff, doesn't have profits, does have debts. It's a shell company. So where's the money really come from? We don't know. Not a word in the mainstream media about that. And that's news now. We're not talking about past corruption. That's happening right now. That money was given to him this summer. Where's the media storm about that? If it was a Labour politician, it would be furious. And which would the public care more about? Starmer getting £24,000 worth of gifts and donations, remember it's donations as well, in the last year to help him get elected, or Jenrick getting £75,000 from a company which doesn't exist. And why aren't those who claim to oppose the Tories concerned about this? Why is John McDonnell whining about Starmer accepting gifts for which there has been no quid pro quo and which is normal for senior politicians and, as it turns out, even some of his backbench mates across the political spectrum? Not in the slightest bit concerned about the obviously dodgy donation to Jenrick. Not a single breath has come from him on that. Or the fact that Farage has been gifted travel over this summer that was worth more than all of Starmer's donations in the last year combined. This is why Labour are their own worst enemy. When it comes time to pick an opponent, right, we want a fight, we're up for a fight, who are we going to pick for an opponent? They pick themselves over the Tories every time. And I'm not suggesting people should back Labour out of tribal loyalty. I hate that in politics. If your own party's not doing the right thing, absolutely demand better. But Starmer, Reeves and Rayner have not broken any rules. It's not even like people are calling for the rules to change. They're just calling for Starmer to follow some different unwritten rules that nobody ever even mentioned before. It's not like we've had years of people saying, oh, we shouldn't accept these sorts of gifts. No one said it. No one breathed a word about it before now. The Tory press decided to try an angle and everyone jumped on it. It's insane how people are saying that Starmer should not have done a thing, which is perfectly within the rules, but don't have a beef with the rules. Either argue for the rules to change or maybe show a little more concern for politicians who break the rules. When Johnson had Brownlow pay to furnish his flat, that was against the rules. It was so against the rules that he lied to his ethics advisor about it. And when the truth came out and he had to admit it, Johnson didn't just go, oh yeah, sorry. Well, he did say I forgot. But he didn't say, oh, I'll update my declarations. No, he didn't update the declarations because it was very, very against the rules. He paid the money back rather than just update. When the 2023 budget was announced, remember, it meant a lot of public money finding its way into the hands of businesses where Sunak's wife had an interest. Sunak didn't declare that interest. And just because it's his wife, the ministerial code says you have to for a spouse as well. So Sunak did not declare that interest. He broke the rules. Now, it's not that he declared it late, because people go, oh, Starmer's declared his late. Yeah, it was a late declaration by like a day or two. Sunak didn't declare it at all. And this was against the rules. And the parliamentary authorities said it was against the rules. There are examples of rules breaking. That's what's been happening here. No rules breaking from Labour. No one seemed to care about Tory rules breaking. All of a sudden, it's a national scandal when a Labour politician does something within the rules that nobody had an issue with before. Give me a break. Sure, there are some examples of the acceptance of gifts I wouldn't have done myself. And you may be thinking, well, I wouldn't have done that. Well, there's some things I wouldn't have done. But I can't judge the behaviour of others by my own standards, but by the standards we as a society set. And that is the rules we set. It's not up to me how people should behave. That being said, Labour have also been naive. They have to expect the Tory media to make mountains out of molehills with them and molehills out of mountains with the Tories. Attlee once said that a Tory could sleep with 10 women a week, but a Labour politician cannot even look at the neighbour's wife across the fence. The times have not changed one little bit. This is a level of hypocrisy in politics that has existed since before I was born. So there's no excuse for Labour politicians and advisers not to be better at this. For example, Starmer has now said that he and senior Labour politicians will not accept gifts of clothes in future. Why? That makes it sound like you have acted improperly or at least injudiciously. Why didn't he say instead, oh, there might be evidence people don't like that rule. Oh, we might have to look at changing it. We'll have a public consultation on the sort of rules on donations and things. That way, when you change those rules, no MP or parliamentary candidate would be allowed to accept gifts in the form of clothes or buy clothes with donations. Why not do that instead? That way it screws the Tories over as well. And it doesn't make it look like you've done anything wrong, which they haven't. So sure, the way Labour have responded is poor. But ultimately, this is a confected row, which should never have been taken seriously in the first place. If there is ever any evidence that public money ends up in the hands of people who gave something in return for it, then we should make a fuss. But unless that ever happens, all people are doing by being mad at this and not actual Tory corruption going on right now is playing into the Tories' hands. They are loving this. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.